Coming up this week, what is your opinion on pipelines? Also, are the feds moving fast enough on indigenous issues? This and much more to come. Hitting the streets, this is Outburst. Hello and welcome to Outburst. I'm Glenn McGuinness. Well, the federal government's decision to approve pipelines has drawn both praise and criticism depending on who you ask. Some people feel it's an important economic driver and a big boost for the economy, while others feel it's an environmental disaster just waiting to happen. So, where do you stand with the issue? Our question: what is your opinion on pipelines?
I think that regretfully we have to build them. I know that there's a lot of controversy about it, but effectively, we have the natural resources in the ground. We've got to get them to market. There's no easy solution. It's some people are very much opposed to them, some are in favor, and on balance, I think I'm in favor. I think the technology has improved significantly now, and we should be able to install them safely and run them safely. That's my hope.
My concern about pipelines is there is an enormous economic push to create them that sometimes is inevitably going to override legitimate, fundamental concerns about the protection of the environment. And in the long run, it's not creating more money, but preserving the environment that's in everybody's interest.
Well, I think they should be built. I mean, they are an integral part of our infrastructure. If you can look around you, all these buildings for sure are heated for the most part with natural gas. So you're going to have to get natural gas to them for one. And oil is going to be with us for the foreseeable future, and so it's beneficial for us to be able to sell our oil, not just to the States with, say, the Keystone, but also try to get it to other markets around the world, say Europe and then Southeast Asia. So oil is going to be used regardless. So do we want a piece of that market, or are we going to give it away to somebody else? So I think it comes down to that.
I know it's a very controversial subject here in Canada. And most people's opinions aren't really in the middle. I would say, if I look at it from a big picture perspective, I'm pro-pipeline as long as there's some better checks and balances in place in terms of safety and lack of leaks. If you look at what's happening now, a lot of the oil we get, for instance, is coming from the Middle East and it's causing wars. I think it's a better alternative to have it come from a Canadian source, create Canadian jobs, and contribute to the Canadian economy.
Talk about controversy. I guess it has to be approved by the First Nations. I mean, these are their lands, so they must be on board. I think we've done enough damage to our First Nations peoples over the years, well, from the beginning of our time here on this continent. They've been abused repeatedly, and we can't keep that up. So they have to be on board with the pipeline for sure. And I'm sure that we can find that balance with them if we sit down and discuss it.
That is the $1 million question, isn't it? Or $1 billion question. We are a resource economy. We cut down trees, we mine, we exploit our natural resources, and it's made us very wealthy. So, how do we get away from that? I don't know that it's possible at this point in time.
They appear to be a necessary evil in the world that we live. I think that I'm under the opinion that if we're going to have to export petroleum products, they should be products, not raw materials. I think that the material that is shipped out of the tar sands, out of the oil sands, depending on which side of the argument you're on, I believe that it should be refined in Canada. And if we're going to ship product, then ship product, but not this dangerous dill bit that's proposed to go through the pipelines.
I'd like to say no pipelines, but I don't think that's feasible. I mean, if shipping it by train is definitely one of the worst options you could do. You can see that what happened back east with the train. So it is the option. The only option is pipelines. What we have to do as a society is quit using the fossil fuels, lower our needs in energy, and then we won't need to pipe it from point A to point B.
the present government, provincial governments, provincial, federal, have to take into account the protests and the dissent that's out there. Listen to it and try and modify their approach accordingly.
People don't realize that the biggest threat to our country is global warming. And if we don't get natural gas, which is methane, to China, that threat of global warming, fish dying, all of that stuff is a threat to everyone in this country. And First Nations are leading the way in terms of asking industry, like oil companies, who have had pipelines in the ground for 70 years, to go back and change those lines, because those are the problem. If Enbridge does not go back and remove the lines and put new lines in, new pipelines in, that will continue to harm the environment. And I think First Nations working together from in this country will have a greater say as to what happens in British Columbia and other parts of Canada.
In what year was the Trans-Canada Highway officially opened? 1952, 1962, or 1972?
62.
I'll say 52.
I'm going to go with 1962.
52. 1952.
62?
I'll go with 52.
The answer, 62. Very good. In 1962, Canadians celebrated the grand opening of the Trans-Canada Highway after the final stretch through Rogers Pass, BC was finally completed. A task force appointed by the Canadian government on the legalization of marijuana has recently recommended that sales be restricted to those 18 years and older, and possession should be no more than 30 grams. It also recommended that cannabis sales should happen in storefronts and not alongside alcohol and tobacco. We sent our cameras out to get your feedback. Our question: where should legalized marijuana be sold?
I don't particularly care to see it sold like cigarettes or whatnot at the local grocery store or at the local corner store. But I think dispensaries, there's nothing wrong with dispensaries. I think that they're actually fairly common here in Vancouver. But people lighting their hair on fire that, they somehow think this is a gateway drug to God knows what, is they just haven't read any kind of research at all.
I'm not fond of these pop-up shops all over the place, these ones without business licenses, because we don't know where it's coming from. We know that there are many organized gangs around here and criminal organizations that grow this stuff. Do these pot shops, are they receiving money, giving money back to organized crime, which are used to maybe crystal meth and other things like that? I would like to see it, for lack of a better place, a BC liquor store, right? Controlled by the government, because these private pot shops, if they're receiving things under the table, how do we as Canadians get, for any transaction of goods, there's taxes. If it's all cash and under the table, we have no idea, right? And so society is losing out through tax money, and we don't want to be enriching criminal gangs, so the government needs to find some place for that.
So I'd like to, as we do with alcohol, keep it out of the hands of younger children, except when it's required by medical. I mean, there's epilepsy and some of these other conditions help with medical marijuana. So I would think in liquor stores, in pharmacies, in a place where the dispensation could be controlled, so it goes to those who are old enough to make the decision.
I see the dispensaries all the time, and you see all kinds of people walking in and out. I think I feel a bit safer with that method as opposed to people doing that on the streets or selling that kind of stuff on the streets. So, yeah.
Dispensaries, keep it at dispensaries, not alcohol. Don't mix it.
Probably at pharmacies or similar. I don't think it should be any more deregulated than alcohol is. And if we have to buy from the government liquor store here, I don't know why we'd be able to buy marijuana, at the, the what's it called, dispensaries here, which seem less regulated than your average cold beer and wine store.
It should be sold in every community because there is a threat to for citizens, because you can go to a marijuana dispensary and know that the marijuana is safe. If you buy it on the street, you're probably going to be having other drugs in it, which causes fentanyl, I think, is the issue right now.
I agree with that,
Yeah. So I think that regulating it and taxing it, I think that's the way to go.
I think it should be governed much the same as alcohol is. So either LCBO, some people say drugstores, but drugstores, you think of healthcare and prescriptions, but then again, marijuana, is it used for healthcare or is it used for recreational, substance like alcohol is? So I guess really at the end of the day, the LCBO would be the best choice for it. And then, of course, a lot depends too on legislation, how they write the legislation for it. If it is just for medicinal purposes, then it would be drugstores. If it's for both, then I guess LCBO and or drugstores.
It's pretty much at the dispensaries. Your local pharmacy, I guess.
I think it should be sold somewhere where it can be controlled, a dispensary. Or something like the LCBO, where we can tax it and keep it out of the hands of minors.
And why do you think that? You look like a minor yourself.
I'm not a minor myself. I'm 25, but I just think that we should be taking advantage of the tax money that we can get out of taxing it, and that if we're going to treat it like alcohol, then we should just sell it the same way.
I think it's being sold, makes sense to the way it's being sold right now in dispensaries, but I feel like moving forward it should just be the same as alcohol or cigarettes.
And why is that? Why do you have those thoughts? Why is that your opinion?
I just feel like the information about marijuana is just not correct. Like general public, they don't really know the dangers of it and how safe it is compared to cigarettes and alcohol, and I think as a society we need to move forward, and that's where I'd like to see it in the future.
I think it should be sold at dispensaries. I know the people who have marijuana cards and get it through dispensaries already, and I think they were doing a pretty good job at it. Although there's all of the other pop-up illegal dispensaries, which it's good if you just want some weed. But I think going that route would be a good way to go. I know Shoppers Drug Mart is trying to get a foothold on it, which they probably do a good job as well if they were dispensing it the same way as as they do with regular drugs. But I think they had a good thing going already. But the influx into the system has kind of shaken it all up a little bit.
Postal codes in Prince Edward Island begin with what letter? A, B, or C?
A?
A? A?
I'll go with C.
It's C.
B.
I'll go with C.
It's C.
No kidding.
Yep.
All postal codes in PEI begin with the letter C.
Leading up to and following the 2015 federal election, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised Indigenous leaders across the country to reset their relationship based on cooperation and respect. The Liberals had promised Indigenous communities $8.4 billion over 5 years, made a good start on boil water advisories in different communities across the country, and also got the ball rolling on an inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. But Indigenous leaders feel there's still a long way to go. So we posed this question to you. Is the federal government moving fast enough on Indigenous issues?
I can answer that pretty quickly. I don't believe that they are, simply because it doesn't seem as if there has been enough action after the whole inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal and Indigenous women was announced. It's great that they are doing that, but I just don't think they're going fast enough.
It doesn't seem that way. It seems like things are sort of stagnant, as they always have been. They like to make big promises, but I haven't really seen any evidence that that they're really moving in any different direction from the Harper government. Just they seem to be a lot better at it's the way they talk. They talk the talk better than the Harper government did, but I haven't seen them walk the walk yet.
I don't know why or why not. I don't think they are. It's taken so long to get to the point that we're at now that somebody needs to kickstart them. But I don't know what's going to do that. Public opinion's the only thing that will force them. And you can only do that by voting.
I don't think they're moving fast enough on indigenous issues. I think it should be a priority for the government to ensure that there's fresh water at all native reserves. Perhaps some reserves are not as viable as others. They should also move faster with the Highway of Tears laws to women.
I don't think they are. I think they're actually going backwards. Trudeau just signed a pipeline down in BC that goes over some native land. So, that's our new prime minister, and already they're not valuing or respecting the indigenous people, and they said they would. So I think we're backtracking here. We're not even making improvements, but we're doing the same thing we've always done for the last 50 years.
Well, I will say that it's moving. I'm not sure if it's moving fast enough, but it's also something that is not that easy to do that fast. There should be time and there should be things that happen in certain order, but I think that it's still doing something for it, and then depend on which way you're looking for. Maybe it's not too fast, or maybe it could be too fast, or it's fast enough. Depend also on your situation. You need to keep a balance to it, but I think that it's still doing something.
I guess we could always do more, and I feel that there is a great divide between, our ancestors in Canada and the first inhabitants of this land, and say this metropolitan city that we live in. And I think there's a big divide that needs to be bridged.
Well, I think he's only been there 1 year, and he's done quite a lot. But of course, he's going to make things happen now. He's had conferences and things like that, but things on the floor, he doesn't have many up to now. So let's hope he goes in the same direction and gives a little more for the Aboriginal.
I mean, every single Canadian should have clean, safe drinking water, period. End of discussion. Every Canadian should have decent schools and access to education. I think that people, whether they be from whatever background, should have an equal opportunity to succeed in this country. Period. Not based on their skin, not based on their ethnicity, not based on whether they're First Nations or not. It makes me angry, and I never realized it until I actually came west, because back east it just was not seen. And out here, it's kind of in your face. I mean, you just have to go down to the east side and see that, unfortunately, First Nations people don't have the same kinds of opportunities that the rest of us have, and that's the great injustice, I guess.
I think we need to move carefully. I think a Band-Aid solution, which we've done in the past, I mean, in a lot of cases, and I've heard in reserves, they throw money at the problem, but the problem goes to lawyers and accountants, and none of the money goes directly to solve the solution. So I think we need to take our time to make sure that the money is going directly to those that need the services, and not to this middle layer that seems to make a fortune off of the Aboriginals.
No, I don't think so. I think there's, Justin Trudeau had that as one of his big things, but I kind of see a standstill in that, not doing as much. Like the opening inquiry into the missing women and stuff, that's something, but it's kind of just a lot of talk so far, I think.
I don't know. It's hard to say. They're deeply complicated issues, so it's hard to say if they're moving quickly enough. I think everyone would like them to move quicker, but they're extremely complicated with a lot of moving parts and a lot of people to satisfy, and I don't think you ever will satisfy everyone. So.
Well, I think the government is working with First Nations people, and they are listening, and they're trying to find a way. I think that through the work of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, that we'll find a way to deal with the global warming, deal with the natural gas going through British Columbia particularly. I think that biggest threat, as I mentioned, is global warming, and that people really don't understand that. I think that government is listening to First Nations, but it does take time.
Canada's universal healthcare system is renowned around the world, but it's not without its flaws. Wait times have doubled in this country since 1993, with no relief in sight. So, how do we fix this problem? Our question. What are your ideas to reduce wait times for medical treatment?
Healthcare is a right of all Canadians, and it should be accessible, and it should not have we should not be waiting for years to have important surgeries. I mean, people die waiting for surgery.
There is really no way. In socialized medicine, as they increase the funds, more people will use it. It's basically, at the end of the day, it will always be rationing. We can't spend millions of dollars every year to increase numbers of surgeries and procedures. There's just, we can't afford it. We muddle through at the end of the day and do the best we can, and we should just prioritize the absolute, as we're doing now. I think the people, the worst case scenarios, go first.
I definitely like the idea, and there's been a lot of talk about holistic clinics where you have the nurse practitioners, you have the doctors, you have a nutritionist, you have everyone in the same clinic. So you can go into one place and get your problems looked at holistically. Right now, the problems with doctors is they get paid per complaint of the patient, so that they don't want to spend that much time with you. They maximize the amount of money they make by spending as little time with you as possible. So they're not getting all of the conditions and problems that you're dealing with. So you have to go back to the doctor more and more often because your problems haven't been dealt with. If the doctor spent the time to listen to you and find out what the underlying, you could say, well, I have a stomach ache. But the underlying problem could be something else. So they treat the stomach ache, but meantime, you're still ill. They don't treat it, so you're back to the doctor. You're probably going to emergency rooms. The biggest problem right now is we don't have enough GPs for the population. I mean, emergency room, and the first time I was there, half of the emergency room was there because they had the flu. If there would have been a doctor for them, they could have gone to the doctor.
The federal government has to make a greater effort to support the provincial governments because it's their responsibility in terms of healthcare, and so that coming up with ideas and then assisting different ways of doing that. But provincial governments also have to look very carefully at what the wait times are for and what medical practice is, and whether, in fact, physicians are doing the right things, and whether with more and more technology available, in fact, it increases wait times. In fact, there may be some technology we don't need to invest in.
Wait times in hospitals. No, I don't really have any ideas on how you can improve them. I mean, I think you compare Canada to countries like India, where they use the same MRI equipment, but they have they see a lot more people per day. Maybe the way to reduce wait times is just a more efficient use of the limited machinery we have.
Well, I think one of the problems we have at the moment is that the whole system of medical care is really not very efficient. We should be giving a lot more responsibility to healthcare workers such as nurses and registered nurses, and I forget the other category of nurses. They're very capable of giving some treatments, and quite often the wait times are just a result of doctors being overstressed, and we're just not delegating enough of the responsibility, I think, to those who could very, very easily handle it.
I'd say there were three obvious solutions. The first one is that the federal government and the provinces need to put some more money into the purchasing of specific forms of healthcare to speed up the whole process. Secondly, one of the ways that additional money should be spent would be the earliest possible diagnosis, so that they could then proceed to select those people whose need is the most urgent from those who do not have an urgent need that has to be taken care of immediately, or their health care will suffer. And that's a relatively easy thing to do, but earlier diagnosis is expensive, it requires medical equipment, it requires specialists as well as generalists, and that's why the need for more money. I'd say the third thing that needs to be done is a more rigorous development of immediate care facilities that are not part of an emergency room, but are there to provide care, complicated care in some cases, for people who have a specific need for both diagnosis and treatment. Those are my three suggestions.
Hire more doctors for sure. I'm not sure if this is kind of a result of years ago when they reduced the number of medical school spaces here. So, you know, those doctors that have aged since then are now retiring, and perhaps they weren't being replaced in the numbers that were needed. Plus, we have an aging population. So you're going to have more people visiting emergency rooms than in the past just because of their age and different accidents and whatever just happen naturally with age. So yeah, it's going to need more doctors, more nurses, for sure, and all better organization too, not just to say, let's just put more doctors and nurses in a hospital and everything will fall into place. It also needs good management as well.
Well, we're not from Toronto, but I know that in Vancouver, 25% of the ORs have just been recently closed because of the nursing shortage. So I think there's a lot to be done right now about discovering how many nurses we really are short, or whether or not the hospital boards are actually just letting them go to save money. I guess down at the bottom line is the bottom line of money on finance, and I know that health services the staffing is 80% of the hospital cost.
It's a tough one. I think maybe increasing more emergency walk-in centers and MRIs are also something that people have to wait a long time for. Maybe increase the number of clinics there. I know the U.S. has gone the privatization route, and that sort of gives you a two-tier health system where people that can pay for it get it right away, and then the rest of the population is essentially waiting. So I think a hybrid maybe of the two, although I think it's unpalatable to most of the public to have private health care here. So the solution would be to increase the number of clinics.
Which riding did Sir John A. Macdonald represent back in 1867? Halifax, Nova Scotia, Kingston, Ontario, or Victoria, British Columbia? Halifax, Kingston, or Victoria?
Kingston. Halifax.
Victoria.
I'll go with Kingston.
Kingston?
It's Kingston. You did very well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
In Canada's first federal election in 1867, Sir John A. Macdonald represented the riding of Kingston, Ontario.
That's all for this episode of Outburst. Like what you see? Well, you can watch more episodes on our website at www.cpac.ca, on our CPAC TV to go app, and also on our YouTube channel. You can also join the conversation via social media on Twitter and Instagram at CPAC_TV. I'm Glenn McGuinness, and on behalf of all my colleagues at the Cable Public Affairs channel, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.